We're excited so many of you could join us this evening. We have a full room. So if you have a family member who isn't able to join us this evening, or a friend, a neighbor, we are recording this live and it'll be available after our session this evening. And we're also broadcasting live on our YouTube channel. So you can do a search in YouTube for Terp Family. We're conducting these sessions this summer to help ease your transition to the University of Maryland as new members of the Terp family. Oh, okay, sorry. Reading messages, YouTube is not working, so we'll have a recording. Again, this is designed to help ease your transition to the university as new members of the Terp family. And we recognize the many challenges presented by COVID-19. So we felt this is a good opportunity for us to share updates and timely information with you. And the focus of tonight's session is plans for fall semester. Now, with all that being said, I also want to manage everyone's expectation by noting that our speakers tonight will provide you with what we know at this time. And that means there will still be unanswered questions. We understand the frustration and uncertainty, so please know that we will do our very best tonight. Before I introduce our first speaker, I just want to review tonight's format. Each of our speakers will share with you for about 10 minutes. There's 4 of them, so I think if I do my math correctly, that'll take us to about 7:45, which will leave us some time for questions. We might have more time than that for questions. And we do welcome your questions, so please use the Q&A feature. You'll find that either at the top or the bottom of the Zoom window. And you can enable this just by clicking the Q&A button, and then you can submit your questions. We will be reviewing them throughout the presentation. We're kind of monitoring the questions as we go. We have a few staff members who may answer them immediately in writing, or we'll save them and ask them live during the Q&A portion when all of our speakers are finished. If there are questions we simply can't get to during our time together, we will work very hard to respond to those questions after the session. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now because we really want to make sure that we're focusing on our presenters. And so it's my pleasure to introduce our very first speaker, Dr. Patty Perillo, our Vice President for Student Affairs. Patty.
Hello, parents and families. It is a joy to be with you tonight. I'm in just my 5th month here at the University of Maryland as the new Vice President for Student Affairs. I was a doctoral student, so I graduated. I'm an alumna of this great institution and came back to serve as the new Vice President for Student Affairs. And just to set the stage a little bit, when I was here 20 years ago, Dr. Sacred Bodison, the director of our health center, was here then too. And on day 3 of the job, she called me and said, it's time for us to begin to meet to talk about COVID. And so since January 24th, many of us across the institution and certainly in the Division of Student Affairs have been leading efforts around COVID and COVID response. We certainly began in the spring semester with making sure that we were able to get our students home safely, that we were all moved to teleworking, and we had 2 fundamental principles during that time. One principle was, let's make sure we keep everybody safe and healthy and well. And the second principle was, let's make sure that we save this semester for our students, because we knew that was really, really important for students and families. And so we successfully did that. And since about May, President Lowe, actually before that, probably in early April, President Lowe commissioned 7 working groups to begin to think about how we will plan for a gradual, phased fall opening. And so these 7 working groups have been working for the last 3 months diligently and coming up with some answers. And there are still some questions that need to be answered, and we know that. I've been working in higher education for 30 years. And I can honestly say that in my entire 30 years, I have never been in a leadership position like this before. And my guess it's true for many of you as parents and family members, as employees, as maybe CEOs and directors in your own organizations, right? We are literally building this plane as we are flying it and coming up with first answers first and then next answers. And what we know is that for a community of 50,000 people, ultimately, there's a lot of work that we need to do and certainly have been doing. I would be remiss, parents, if I didn't say this, because it's really, really true and it's really, really important. You are such important partners to us. What we know is that our students will not be successful. They will not be successful if we do not partner with you and be in relationship with you. You know them well. They are your students. And you are trusting them to us, which we are really grateful for. But what we know is that the relationship that we establish with you during our students' tenure here at the University of Maryland will make all the difference in the world. And so one of the reasons why we wanted to begin to meet with you tonight is to begin to set the stage for this relationship and this partnership, for you to know that there are people here at the University of Maryland that you can ask questions of, that will serve as your resource and your guides. And that is true for our students as well. There's no doubt about it. Lots of times people don't know what the Division of Student Affairs is. And so I think it's really important to set the stage for you about what is the Division of Student Affairs. So there are about 14 departments in the Division of Student Affairs, over 3,500 students, faculty, and staff that work in the Division of Student Affairs, and it's by design. We are in their lives all over campus. And so we are residence halls and the dining centers. We are residential facilities, the health center, the counseling center, recreation, what we call recreational sports or rec well, the Stamp Student Union, fraternity and sorority life, services for students with disabilities, and the list goes on and on. There are 14 departments, and again, it's by design. We are with and amongst our students because what we know is that your students are the best of the best and the brightest of the brightest, and we want them to thrive here at the University of Maryland. Not just survive, but thrive. And we are positioned and committed to doing all that we can to make sure that they're successful. So again, part of that success is being in relationship and partnership with you. And that's why we're beginning tonight. Brian Watkins and Danielle Walker, who are on this call, are staff in our office of really parent and family programs and affairs. And they're going to continue to partner with you just as I will and all of my colleagues in the division during your time here at Maryland. What I want you to know is that we certainly consider our students terrapins, but we consider you terrapins as well. And as terrapins, we're going to care for you in the same ways that we really will care for our students. So we have answers to lots of questions. There is no doubt about it. And you may ask some questions tonight that we don't have answers to. And it is our promise and our commitment to continue to answer those questions for you. I belong to many listservs like many of you do. So all of my vice president colleagues in the Big Ten, and I just left the ACC. So all of my vice president colleagues in the ACC and my colleagues in the SEC, we're communicating a lot and connecting a lot. And most of us are in about the same place. Institutions are communicating some things, and then they're waiting to communicate more. And so we are trying to, as best as we can, communicate answers as quickly as we have them. And we've also learned that some of our communications have been confusing, and that certainly was not by design. We hope to clarify some of those things for you tonight and in future Q&A and newsletters and some information, and just simply by answering your questions tonight. So again, thank you for being here. We are glad you're here. We're going to stay the course with you tonight. All of my colleagues and I agreed that we're going to spend just a little bit of time talking and save more time for your questions because we want to meet your needs. And so hopefully we'll get to more of your questions than less of those questions. So I look forward to hearing your questions and spending some time with you tonight. Thank you. Brian?
Thank you, Patty. It is storming here and I'm under skylights, so I apologize for the background noise that folks might hear. I would now like to introduce Dr. Sacred Bodison, the Interim Director of our University Health Center. Sacred, thanks for being here.
You're welcome, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. It's storming in my area as well, so if you hear a lot of booming, it's not me being very exciting, but it's the ambiance outside. Since January 24th, as Dr. Perillo mentioned, we've been living and breathing nothing but COVID-19 at the health center, and it takes up every of our waking hours. But we do want to share some information with you. Fortunately, we are in Maryland, and Maryland happens to have a relatively low amount of COVID-19 activity at this time compared to many other states. But we know that our students who are coming to live in our residence halls are coming from all over the country. And we also know that probably we will have cases of COVID-19. But we are working on many different kinds of strategies to identify and to contain any cases that we see. One of the things that we will do early on is do some testing. And that's still a work in progress, but we do plan to test our students, especially those who live in our residence halls. At the health center, we also want to maintain an ongoing ability to test throughout the term. And so we will be able to, if our students become symptomatic in any way or have any complaints that are suggestive of COVID-19, we will be able to test and hopefully have an answer in a short period of time. The other aspect that's important is contact tracing. And you've probably heard this mentioned by many health officials nationally about the importance of that. And Maryland happens to be a state that has a very robust contact tracing strategy. And our county health department, we're in Prince George's County, and the health center works very closely with our county health department on contact tracing. In fact, the health center is itself conducting what we call early contact tracing. And that is, if we get early knowledge about a possible case, we will start to isolate and quarantine and protect people from being exposed as soon as we know it. And so it probably will be more quick than the actual county health department personnel. And so we hope to stay on top of things by reacting very quickly when we're aware of a possible case. The other area of concern that people wonder about is, can we actually quarantine somebody or isolate somebody on our campus? And so our resident life department has set aside some specific housing just for that purpose, so that if we do need to isolate a student or quarantine some contacts, that there are spaces on campus to house these individuals, and we will take care of them. They will eat, they will be fed, and we'll monitor them for whatever needs that they have during that period of time. So I'm not going to say much more because I'm sure that there are lots of questions, and I will save time for that. Okay, Brian?
Thank you, Sacred. Our next speaker is Veronica Scales, the Director of Resident Life. Veronica.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here tonight. We're seeing the questions flow in, and I'm hoping I can answer some of those questions for you in my short talk with you all tonight. But first, I want to start with saying and talk about admiration for parents and for students who have somehow managed to make it through a high school graduation and are coming into college in a time where things are going to look so different than they have looked traditionally in the fall semester. So just wanted to start with a little bit of admiration and to say congratulations to the students and congratulations to the families for making it through this. So I just want to start with that. And now I'm going to jump into my list of questions that we've been getting that I hope are helpful for you all, and just to give you a bit of more information and a look into how Resident Life has been managing some of these processes. So the fall is going to look very different. You know, generally we house 8,500 students here on campus, and we usually have singles, doubles, triples, and quads. This year alone, we're only doing singles and doubles. And so all of those big spaces that we've had for doubles or for triples, we're only gonna have singles and doubles because physical distancing is really important to us here at the University of Maryland. Dr. Bodison just spoke about quarantine and isolation housing. So, you know, we want students to live with us. We do. We love when students want to return year after year. And it really broke our hearts this year when we had to tell a few students, hey, we really need your housing for quarantine and isolation. We know that the environment that we're in with a lot of students and a lot of folks in a small area, that there could be some potentially COVID positive cases. And like Dr. Bodison said, we want to take care of those students. And so a team between Res Life and Res Facilities has worked really hard to put together, and dining, of course, a plan that will focus on quarantining and isolation. When students come back to campus, things are going to look a little different. And so we have to think about what are the expectations that we're setting for our students. We don't want to create false expectations of what will happen in the halls. We're not going to have some of the programs that we've had in the past. And for incoming freshmen, that may be a little sad. They'll, if they've had friends or sisters or brothers or other folks that have come to the University of Maryland, and they've experienced some of the rah-rah President's Welcome or things that are happening in the football stadium, those may not be in existence for this year. We're still working on those, like Dr. Patty Perello said. We're still working to figure out every day what can and cannot happen. A few months ago, we were in phase 1. Now we're almost in phase 3. Who knows what we're going to be in when we get to August. And so we're really hopeful, but also cautious at the same time. When our students come back to campus, I know Dr. Bodison's team has worked on a pledge, and my team is working on something that's going to go hand in hand with that. And because we are working on these things, we also want to share that we're going to be doing a lot of high-touch cleaning in our buildings to make sure that folks know that we are taking this very seriously. And so the high-touch cleaning that already existed, we're doing it doubly. Doubly is not really a word, but it's a word right now. The other thing I want to share with you is our team is here to help. So Resident Life, as soon as the message went out from Dr. Lowe last week, our message followed about 24 hours later. And we're here to help between our assignments team, between our programming team, and from our off-campus housing team. We are here to help. And so a lot of the questions that we've been receiving have to do with how can I make a decision when I don't know my academic schedule just yet? And so we pushed our deadline back to July 17th. Originally, our deadline was July 10th. And because we know that academics is the priority here for your students and for your family members, we pushed our deadline back to make sure that students and families are making the right decision for themselves. We know that parents, and you know your child best, or you know your family members best, and we can't make that decision for you. So we really hope that you all have that open and honest conversation about what the fall semester could potentially look like, and that you all make a decision that's best for your families. So a few other things I'll share. Roommates, a big topic of conversation. So early next week, the Department of Resident Life is sending a message out that's going to include a lot of good information. And we're very excited about this email because it's something that everyone is asking. When will I find out about roommates? When will I find out about move-in? We're not sure about moving just yet. But roommates, the roommate finder and the request will be available July 13th through the 16th. And Tracy and Dennis and Laura are here answering questions back and forth with a few of you. Our assignments will go out August 3rd. That may seem very late, but when we are waiting till July 17th, we need a few weeks with our team to really match roommates together, make sure that room preferences are matched, and that we're honoring all of the accommodations that we're getting as well. The last thing is I feel like I'm talking a lot right now, and I want to leave some questions for you all, is that we have a lot of resources. So if you haven't been to the Family Sessions reslife.umd page, there's a lot of good information on there. So please, please, please check it out, and we'll drop it in the Q&A for you all to check out. And then move in. We don't have all the answers just yet, and it may take us a while to get there. But just know we're working with our Big Ten colleagues. We're asking other folks here in the state of Maryland, what are you doing? And just know our move-in day traditionally has been 3 days. And in order to enact physical distancing, we're gonna have to spread that out. What that looks like, just yet, we're not sure. But we have a plan that we're going to talk with Dr. Perillo about soon, and try to get that into your hands as soon as we can. But we just want to say congratulations to the students who are on here, and congratulations to the families. I'm going to yield my time to Colleen and back to Brian. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Veronica. Can everyone hear me? Hopefully, okay. I switched microphones, so hopefully this is working better. Now I'd like to introduce Colleen Wright-Riva, the Director of Dining Services. Colleen.
Thank you, Brian. Hi, Terp families. You've already heard from my colleagues about all of the decisions that are going into place to make your experience wonderful. I want to share with you that dining is doing the same thing. We are racking our brains and thinking about the best way to serve a community of anywhere from 7,000 to 8,000 students this fall. And we have a preliminary plan. So what I thought I'd do today is give you a little bit of that, but to ask you to understand that as we learn more in the coming weeks, things may tweak a little bit and may change here and there, but I'm gonna paint a little bit of a picture so you understand how you as a student or you as a parent know that your student is being fed. If you've been on campus, you know that we serve the campus community out of 3 large dining halls. 2 of them are literally 3 minutes away from each other. So one of the ways and one of the strategies that we have to make sure that our units are not overcrowded and that we can make sure that we have physical distancing and do all of the things we need to keep you safe, one of those 2 dining halls will be exclusively carry out. So students will be able to get a meal there and take it with them. The other one, 3 minutes away, will be for reservation dine in. And when a student dines in that experience, they will be able to have seconds, go back through the line, and enjoy more of an all-you-can-eat experience. On the other side of campus, if your student is housed on South Campus, we only have 1 dining hall, so it will have both elements. It will have a dine-in by reservation experience, and it will have a small section dedicated to carry-out. But that's not enough. I mean, our dining halls typically seat 900 people. We have to de-densify, that is one of the words around campuses, by as many as 600 seats. So when you come into a dining hall in the fall, it will have 250 to 300 seats. And with those seats, that means that we have to make sure you're 6 feet apart. And so we know that 3 dining halls won't get it done. So we will have approximately 5 other outposts for you to be able to experience dining in a carry-out, take it with you environment. So that's the great news. Every dining plan has a basic feature of 3 meals per day. There are dining plans that you can buy that have one other attribute called dining dollars. And those will be dollars you can use in our retail locations, in our convenience stores, for food, for supplies, for health and beauty aids. So I think you're definitely going to have your needs met with our dining plans. You may have heard that all of our pricing is frozen, so our tuition and our room and board fees are the same as last year. So that you'll see no increase in that. We're really excited to take care of your students. We will have physical distancing in place. Our entire team will be in masks and be following all of the safety guidelines that Sacred outlined earlier in our discussion. And we will make sure that we are doing our due diligence for cleaning and really doing everything we can to assure you that your student is eating and enjoying meals in a very safe environment. I don't know what else to say. So Brian, I probably went really fast, but I will turn it over to Q&A.
That sounds great. Thank you, Colleen. Okay, friends, we have thus far 153 questions that got submitted in the Q&A. I have been trying to do my best speed reading effort to go through them while all of you were talking and try to pull together some themes. So first, and folks who've submitted, thank you. We're not going to get to all of them. So again, if we don't get to your question, we will do our best to follow up with you after this session because we are logging all of the questions that are coming in. Patty and Sacred, if you could you, there's been a lot of questions around testing.
Sure.
What are the requirements going to be? Who's going to be tested? Can you just speak to kind of where the current conversations are about testing for our entire university community, so students, faculty, and staff?
Sure. Dr. Bottleson, you want me to start and you want to follow, or?
Sure.
Okay. So you all may know that we're going to have a new president starting next week. Dr. Darrell Pines is the new president of the university starting July 1st. He's been on the campus for 25 years, as most recently as the dean of our College of Engineering. And he has repeatedly said that he knows that as he steps into his presidency, he wants to make sure that our students are tested. Now, in our last conversation, what we've been really clear about is talking about our residential students being tested. That one of the things that we've talked about is to make sure that as students move onto campus, that they're initially tested. And we are still working out those details. And it remains to be seen. We've got to make sure that we can get all the tests because you're talking about, several thousand. We got to make sure we can get all the things that we need to get. But at this point in time, our plan is to test all students who are living in the residence halls and to have the opportunity for others to be tested. We will always have the opportunity for others to be tested. And so students who are moving in the residence halls, the ideal plan is to have them tested and to ask them to make sure that they do as much as they can to stay around as less people as possible for 24 hours or plus until they get their test results. And then when they get their test results, if we find out that they are positive, what we would do is we would move them to a quarantine or self-isolation space. Now, we're lucky at the University of Maryland. We actually have a school of public health on our campus. And the dean of that school of public health was the deputy surgeon general and acting surgeon general at one point in time. And he has become friends with all of us. We spend a lot of time with Dean Lozniak. He is a great resource for us. And so we actually had faculty members on our campus do some modeling to help us understand the percentage of spaces that we had to hold aside to make sure that we had enough space on campus to allow students who need to self-isolate and are quarantined to have those spaces. And again, unfortunately, we had to tell some students they couldn't live there, but it was the right thing for us to do for those students who are moving on campus. If we were to find a student who's positive, and of course, Dr. Bodison said that, when you talk about a campus this size, we are going to have COVID cases just like you have in your townships and communities and counties all over this country, actually all over the world. And so what happens is, and Dr. Bodison and her team lead this process, she would actually initiate the early contact tracing process. And what that means is that she will call the student, have a direct conversation with the student. She will find out where they've been the last, and in fact, I should turn over to you, Dr. Bodison. We've done this together so many times that I feel like I know the process, but I would love for you to talk about the actual testing process and level 1 and level 2 communication, because I think that's really helpful.
Okay, so I think one of the questions asked about employees as well. And so we've already started with the employees that are on campus. We have, over 1,000, I know, employees that are working on campus. And so we've already started testing with those individuals. And so as Patty mentioned, when our students arrive, we will start to test our students as well very quickly upon their arrival on campus. And if they test positive, we will be working very closely with them to do what we call contact tracing. We hope that that will be very limited because we hope that they will cooperate and stay pre-quarantine until such time as they have their test results. But during the semester, should a student test positive, we will identify contacts. We have a number of high-tech ways to do that. Our IT department actually can track where students have been through their phone system. And so we will help them remember others that they may have come in contact with, and we'll be able to identify those persons and quarantine them appropriately. And we have the spaces for doing that at this time. Testing will be ongoing. I think it's still a work in progress in terms of, exactly if there's a periodicity to it. I can tell you that one of the questions referred to athletes, and that has been settled. The athletes definitely will be tested on a very regular basis. Some of our athletes are already on campus, and they've already about to go through their second round of testing. And so that group for sure will be tested very regularly. But we're still making final decisions about the student body in general.
And Dr. Bodison, I saw that one of the questions also related to what's the percentage of students who test positive? When's the trigger for you to send students back home? Was the question essentially. When would that happen? And unfortunately, that's not a hard and fast answer, and that's not trying to be evasive at all. What I will tell you is that there is we have an emergency management team on campus, trained personnel and emergency management. We also obviously have a health center with trained personnel. We are going to engage as a campus what you call tabletop exercises, where what we're going to do is actually practice as a leadership leadership team, actually everyone on this call would be on it, and a lot of others of leaders across the campus. We're going to essentially practice is what a tabletop exercise in for emergency managers. And so what happens when you have one case? What happens when you have 5 cases? What happens when you have 10 cases? Maybe in the same building, maybe across campus. And we are going to develop plans for our campus response so that we have a sense of what that threshold might be. But it's not a hard and fast percentage because some of it depends on where the students are living. You know, whether it's in one residence halls, many residence halls, whether it's with faculty or staff. But our promise is that we are doing all of our due diligence to prepare ourselves, and we will have answers to those questions before folks come back. It is our hope not to send students home. We don't want to do that. We want to do all that we can to keep students on campus because the learning environment is just really important for them. But again, we would never keep them here if their safety, health, and well-being were in question at all.
Patty, I think we would like our parents to know that they could help us by emphasizing some of the behaviors that our students should practice when they get here. We really want our students to wear face coverings, especially anytime they're inside of buildings. And we want them to keep their distance. So we're physically distancing is really important. And so we will encourage that. We know that that's tough for students, but we will certainly be emphasizing that kind of behavior with them. And of course, we'll have lots of sanitation stations or hand sanitizing stations and you know, help them with scheduling of cleaning their own areas, as well as our own housekeepers will be cleaning high-touch areas on a very regular basis. But the entire community have to work together, including our students, to keep our community safe.
Thank you both very much. Colleen, I'm going to go back to you for a second. And
Sure.
there was a question about, you know, folks were previously really excited about all the access to
I know.
dining halls and the food.
know.
And so with a limit of you know, 3 enter exits per day,
Right.
can you talk about some of the other locations that are available on campus, the
Sure.
other food options, please? Thank you.
Sure. So, you know, we will have the 3 dining halls available, as I mentioned. 2 of them will have, one of them will have the outpost on South Campus, and another one will have a grill type experience, weather permitting, outside for something fun and different every day. And I didn't mention that, but that's considered an outpost as well. There will be 3 other outposts that are strategically located where students would likely, if they were walking to the dining hall and couldn't get there, it's on their travels, so it's in the path. We're talking with Resident Life to firm up one of those locations right now. There will also be 10 cafes open on campus and 3 convenience stores. So we will have a lot of opportunity for students to have experiences. But with regard to, if you are familiar with our past, we were anytime dining, where if our doors were open and your student had a dining plan, you would come in and enjoy as much as you wanted, as often as you wanted while the doors were open. And we would love to do that. You know, it makes me really sad that we can't do that anymore. And I hope this is a really short window of time. I hope it's solved in a semester or 2 so we can move back to that environment. But for student safety, we just can't have people coming in and out at all. So we really have to limit this. And there are other impacts to our staff to think about how we're going to execute as much carry out as we're going to and how we're going to consolidate our team. So we have to be a little bit rigid about 3 meals a day, but they will be comprehensive meals. So if you dine in, as I mentioned, and you make a reservation, it's all you care to eat. If you go to the 251 North, which is all carry out, there will be 5 or 6 stations with full meals, and you would choose which one of those stations you want to go to, and you'll receive a full meal as your carry out meal. If you go to an outpost, there will always be up to 3 entree options per meal experience, along with fruit, a side dish, and a cookie and a beverage as a full meal. And you know, if we try to find a silver lining in this, those experiences that are portable will allow a student who maybe in the past their class schedule was so tight that they didn't get into the dining halls and they couldn't take food out. in this world, they can't actually take 2 meals a day and put one in the refrigerator for later. So we surely want to make sure students have plenty to eat. If we need more outposts, if we don't have the right number, we will add more. We're just trying to scale, so we'll know better if this is the right number once we determine how many students are coming back to campus and how those first few days go in changing student behaviors and getting them used to the new routine. But I want to assure students and parents that I want to bring all you care to eat anytime dining back as quickly as I can. But until we can do that, we are working so hard to provide variety, convenience, safety, and speed, all in this decisions that we've made to bring out these outposts. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Colleen.
You're welcome.
Okay, so it's no surprise that one of the big themes is related to classes. And so, Patty,
Sure.
let's talk coursework and classes and academic schedules.
Absolutely. And we know, in fact, we just had a meeting yesterday with the president and his cabinet and talked specifically about this very issue. It is, according to the provost is the academic leader on campus. That's the title of the position, provost. According to the provost, who's got responsibility for the deans and all of the faculty on campus, they plan to release the information. They've said all along by July 15th. And what we've heard recently is that it's going to happen sooner than that. Part of the issue, and we're finding this for most colleges and universities across the country, there are some colleges that came right out of the gate and said, we're going to be teaching in person. And some of those colleges are going to have to reel it in because they're finding that there are some faculty members that just aren't comfortable because either they're immunocompromised, they're of the age group, they've got significant health issues, whatever it might be. And so what we have been doing is working one-on-one with each faculty member to begin to really identify, when I say we, I mean the campus. I'm not actually doing that work. It's the provost and the deans who are doing that work, actively working with faculty members one-on-one. The hope is broadly that there are more in-person experiences for first-year students and for hands-on kinds of learning and our capstone experiences for our seniors. So we started to identify, if we were to have in-person, what might make some of the most sense. And so since we're going to have first-year students living on campus, but again, we won't know definitively for another week to 10 days, hopefully at max. People are actively working on it. There are some faculty members that are beginning to communicate with students, and so you may begin to see some one-off communications where faculty members are communicating with students who have signed up for certain courses. But the institution will be releasing information, again, no later than July 15th. And the hope is that it's going to be much sooner than that.
Thank you, Patty. And just as a follow-up to that, because there were several questions about, could a student choose to do all online classes and stay home? And, I think the answer to that is absolutely.
Yes. And the student could take online classes and decide to live here. What we're hearing from many of our students, and again, it's been students who were here in the spring semester and then went home. For many of them, the family environment just became more complicated because for many of them, parents, their guardians were also working from home. There were other siblings. There weren't enough laptops. There wasn't enough internet access. That things were louder than they're used to. There was no quiet space for them. And so for some of our students, it's just better from a learning environment to live on campus. And so if their classes are all online, they could certainly live at home. If their classes are all online, they can certainly live on campus. And I think my colleague Veronica talked about that earlier. That's a real familial decision, and you get to decide what is best for you and your family. And that's one of the reasons why Veronica and her team are allowing you and your students to let us know by July 17th. Is that right, Veronica? By July 17th. We want to know what your decisions are around housing. And again, the reason they moved it to July 17th was because we've been told consistently that no later than July 15th, information about the academic calendar will be out. So we wanted to give a little bit more time for people to make those decisions. Now, the hope is that information about the academic calendar will come out before July 15th. And even if it does, July 17th will be the date that we need parents and students to tell us whether or not students are going to live on campus or not. And you get to decide what's best for you and your family.
Thank you, Patty. So Veronica, speaking of housing, a couple of things. So Veronica, could you speak to, there are a couple of families were asking, if their student does decide to stay home and cancel their housing for fall, how does that affect their priority for 2021?
Absolutely. So I want to hit on a few things. I've been scrolling through the questions and there's a few in there. But the question that you just asked, Brian, is really important to us. Any student can cancel their housing contract by July 17th without any penalty. And there will be students who can return back to campus next year will face no penalty. So if you have a priority number and you say, I don't want to come to campus, I maybe want to take a gap year, or I want to stay at home this fall semester, your priority will still be the same next year if you are eligible to live on campus. And so we wanted to make sure that parents and families understand that that's a priority to us. And we don't want to penalize anyone in the housing system. And we want to make sure that we want our students to come back to campus. It really broke our hearts when we had to tell students they couldn't be here. And so we want them to come back and we want them to feel welcome when they return back to campus. Can I answer these other questions real quick, Brian?
Oh, please.
Okay, great.
Thanks,
So
Val.
I misspoke earlier when I talked about the roommate finder and I said the 13th to the 16th. I wrote the date wrong. It's July 13th to the 26th. So I apologize for that mistake. There was a family that asked about what are the advantages to living on campus, right? And Dr. Perello just spoke a little bit about that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what is it like to live on campus here at the University of Maryland. It's an experience for our students. And we have a team that's committed to engagement and making sure that our students who are coming here are engaged. And so our Student Community Development Office within the Department of Resident Life is responsible for fall welcome. And even though we can't have large gatherings in the fall semester, like we have in the past, they are committed to making sure that students have, whether they're small gatherings or virtual gatherings, the community staff are really working with their RAs to figure out how are we going to make sure our students are engaged. When we're talking about large scale programs, we're talking about how do we have these programs outdoors, and then how do we break them into smaller groups that are acceptable. Again, we are in June, and we don't know what August is going to look like. And so we have to plan accordingly with kind of both plans, a plan for small interactions and plans for larger interactions if we get there. But knowing that safety is the #1 priority, engagement and keeping our students engaged in the halls is also a priority. Right up there with safety and security for our students.
Thanks, Veronica. So let's stay on the connections piece and talk a little bit more about the conversations that are taking place now between, I think, many of us in student affairs about how we're going to create opportunities for the connectedness in the environment that we're going to find ourselves this fall, and making sure that students are, and for us to create some really intentional opportunities for students to connect with all of the restrictions that we'll have.
So I'll begin, and I know that Veronica, you can speak with you and your team. So one of the best ways for us to do that is to engage student leaders in the process. And so we've already started that. I have a student advisory group, Veronica does, Dr. Madison does, Colleen does. We have student advisory groups, right? So we've already started to engage them in the process, and they're already beginning to think with us about things that can happen. So for example, many of them are talking about, and I'm not sure about this, but you got to listen to students and pay attention, that they talked about do a bunch of gaming activities. Like you could create so many competitions while students are in the room. Many of them are gamers, and you can create all kinds of opportunities for students to connect that way. They're also talking about, they have witnessed, probably in your own homes, like Zoom family connections. Well, you can create, just like we are right here, kind of a webinar or connections, but do it in a way where that, like, you create races and competitions, and actually it creates like play dates. Like Netflix, for example, has, again, things you learn from students. You all, maybe all of you know this, but I learned from students that all of you can sign up for a movie at the same time and watch it, and then you can communicate about it online. And so we're going to do a whole bunch of those things, while students are, you know, keeping them in their room, keeping them safe, but connecting them. But we're also talking about doing things, and Veronica talked about that, outside, you know, so like yoga on the mall, or I don't know, you can just imagine maybe movies on the mall, but, you know, even thinking about drawing circles, you know, that keep people 6 feet away from each other. And so we're talking about some of those things. Now, Veronica, I know that you and your team are thinking a lot about those things.
Yeah, and so we actually started this past spring, and because we had students who needed to stay with us over the spring semester. And so our student community development office and our RAs did some really great things of learning how do we engage with one another when we can't be physically present with one another. And while the spring semester may be different than the fall semester, we have learned a lot of good lessons of what works with students and what doesn't work with students. And so the things that really work with students are the games that Dr. Perillo just talked about. The other things that really work with students is this murder mystery kind of thing. What is it called when you go in the rooms? I don't know what those things are called. Somebody help me out here.
I think it's murder mystery.
Escape room.
Escape room.
An escape room.
A virtual escape room. I never even knew that was a thing. And so our students have really grasped onto this. And so the Res Life team is going to be the group that helps perfect it for the students before they get here on campus. And, you know, our RAs are working really hard, even though they're not here. Some of our RAs are part of RHA and are sitting on these committees to help think about how are we going to enforce these physical distance rules? How are we going to enforce folks wearing masks when they're not inside their rooms? Those are really hard questions, and we don't want to put our student leaders, your children, in danger. And so while I saw a question that said, you know, these young children or young students are least at risk. Well, they're coming into contact with folks like me who are my age or folks who are older that are more at risk. And so everyone who's a part of this community is part of the campus community. And it's not just about the age here, right? We are all trying to do the best that we can. And there is a campaign that's coming out from the University of Maryland called For Maryland. And it's not just for the students, it's for all of us, because we make this community great on working collaboratively together. And so that's what we're trying to do. It may seem like it's going to be very difficult for students to find that community, but I can guarantee you, students, when they come to campus, they're going to find their community just as they have in the past.
So, Veronica, I'm going to keep you in the hot seat for just a minute. Can you can you speak a little bit more about roommates? There are a number of family members that were noting that their student has made a connection. They definitely have a roommate request. How are those going to be honored in this current scenario?
Absolutely. So we are trying our best to honor those roommate requests. We want folks to live with folks that they know. And Scott, who's our associate director for housing assignments, has said anyone who puts in a housing request, a mutual, it has to be mutual, that we are going to try to honor that to the best of our ability. And so once this form comes out, we hope that students jump on it and that they get it in immediately. It will make our jobs a lot easier. And, you know, we have scheduled a few weeks after we get the request in to create the housing assignment. If we are able to do that a little bit faster, then they'll get their housing assignment a little faster. The other thing I want to say is that students there was a question about singles in here and how many singles we have. You know, we're only doing singles and doubles, and that's a lot of our inventory. Some of the lounges, you know, I saw a few questions that folks are asking about some of the lounges that we're using in non-air conditioned buildings. And those are things and questions that we are still deliberating with and things that may still change, right? So if we have students who don't need to live in lounges and we can open up that lounge space in a non-air conditioned building, we may do that because we know it's going to be hot here in August and September in Maryland. And so we're still working with our partners in res facilities to figure that out. Everything is changing day by day, and we're really just trying to keep up when it comes to the changing needs of COVID and of our buildings and working with our partners and our parents. Did I answer your question, Brian? Okay, good.
Yes, thank you very much. There have been continue to be some more academic specific questions. And so I wanted to note So there were questions about, can we defer admission? What is that going to look like? And I just want to remind all of you that those are questions that we don't know for sure. Will there be a process for deferring admission? Yes. Will that look different than it does currently before we were in a COVID situation? Yes. But we don't know yet what, and can't really articulate what that's going to look like. And we expect all of that information to come with the information about the academic schedule for fall semester, and exactly which classes are online and which ones are in person. And so more to come. And I know it's hard to wait because these are really important pieces of information that are going to drive a really critical decision. And so those are the pieces that we just don't know yet.
And Brian, I just want to underscore that because like we know that you all just had the students, your children, go through a 2020 commencement where they weren't able to, honor it in the ways that you would have loved, right? So they've taken it's one of the biggest developmental transitions in their lives. It's a big deal. Coming to college is a big deal. And we know that, right? And graduating from high school is a big deal as well. And so we want to provide you and our students with as much information as possible as soon as possible. We don't want to keep people in a holding pattern. But again, when you talk about a campus of ultimately 50,000 people, it just takes a little while to get some of these questions answered. And so it is my deep hope that within the next 10 days or so, that all of the information around academics and the admissions process and deferring admissions and all that will be sent to you and your students, and you're going to have that information. In fact, that was a question that I saw some of you had asked earlier, like, how do you get the information that your students may be getting? Brian, I think it's important for you or Danielle to talk about them signing up for the parent newsletter, because one of the things that Brian and his team do is they'll take all the messages that come out from the president or from me or other vice presidents, and they just send it out to parents and families. But I think it's important to let them know how to sign up for that, Brian.
I will do that. Thank you. And I'm not sure, I appreciate the comments that people have made about not being able to hear me. I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure what is up with my microphone, so I switched to a different microphone, which I hope is working better. But yes, our office is here to support you and in this whole task of student success. And that's really ultimately what we all hope for, is that all of our students are successful. And we recognize the really important role that all of you play in supporting your student and helping them to get through their time and their experience here at the University of Maryland. So like Patty said, information that is important are things that we will push out through our office. And we have a communications portal that we use called Terp Family eConnection. And we will automatically load your contact information into our database, and that's happening on an ongoing basis throughout the summer. So you probably haven't heard directly from our office yet, but you will start to soon, which is why we asked the orientation office to send you the information about this Terp Family chat, because we have some restrictions around when we're actually allowed to email you. Your student actually has to register for classes before we can start messaging you from our office specifically. But if you don't want to wait, you can go online at any time and sign up to receive updates from our office. And that's at, Danny, help me out because I don't want to mess this up.
Sure. It's terpfamily.campusesp.com.
Thank you, Danielle.
You're welcome.
So terpfamily.campusesp.com. And you can sign up to get information from our office. And the portal that will give you access to also just is a great home for a lot of information from the university. So when you sign up and you fill out the form, you can actually select how often you want to get our newsletter. So you can get that every week, every other week, once a month. And based on, we want you to fill out your profile and select the communities that you want to be a part of. and that will tailor the newsletter to your interests. So for example, for many of you, you are the parent or family member of a first-year student, and that's one of our communities. And so when you get a newsletter, if there's important information that is very essential for the family member of a first-year student, you will get that information in your newsletter. So that's a really great way for us to tailor and craft our messages just for you.
And Brian, I just want to add, I went ahead and put the URL link in the chat. So if you pull your chat up, you should be able to see that link there, and you can go ahead and create your account.
Great, thank you for that, Danielle. We are almost at time, but let me go back here and see what else is popping up and see if there's one more question that we might be able to answer. And before I do that, I also just want to note, if you haven't gone to the orientation website yet, please make sure you do so. I do see a lot of questions here that are answered throughout the summer during our orientation sessions, especially during the orientation live sessions. So every week, we do something similar to this. And each office, so Resident Life has a session, Colleen, I think Dining has a live session. I know we have a live session. So a lot of the student services, they have live sessions every week. And so it's a great opportunity for you to get very specific information. For example, about tuition bills and payment and how all of that works and how to get access to those things. That's all presented during orientation. I know there was a question about, if we didn't get to a question during the session, will we follow up? We're absolutely going to do our best to do that. All of these questions get saved. And so we'll work our way through that or get that information to another office that can help respond to those questions.
Brian, there was one question somebody's just got to answer. Some parent or
Please.
family member wants to know, where do you get the best crab cake? That was a question. So
Oh.
Colleen, answer that.
I would say Mulligan's, which is our full service restaurant at the golf course, has wonderful crab cakes. And I would encourage you to give them a try.
There you
They're
go.
delicious.
That's a great answer.
It's a true answer.
It is. It's a good one.
They're
It's a good
really,
one.
really good. Their burgers are delicious too. So
They are
just
indeed.
And they've got great salads for us vegetarians. So know that there are great salads too. So.
I do want to share one final slide with everyone. If you have questions or need assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out to our office, and that's the Office of Parent and Family Affairs. Our email address is right there, terpfamily@umd.edu. If you have questions about anything that you've heard tonight or questions or concerns about anything as you think about preparing for fall semester and for your student to start classes this fall, direct them to our office and we will get them to the right place. We can't answer everything in our office, but we know lots of great folks around the university that can help us out. And so we'll make sure that we can move those through to the right places so that you get the information that you need. That ends our time, and I want to thank all of you for joining us. Again, I know that there are, as we started this session, I will end the session and recognize that we know that so many of you have so many questions that we simply don't have answers to today, but the answers will come. It will just take some time because this is a situation that I know all of you understand this, that none of us have ever encountered. And so we appreciate the grace and thought that you give to that as we all make our way through this really challenging time. I thank my colleagues and guests. I appreciate you all, and I appreciate that you gave of your time this evening to talk to our Terp families. And to all of you who are joining us, thank you again. Welcome to the Terp family. We're really glad that you are a part of this wonderful community. And we're excited, really excited to welcome your students in the fall.
Take care of yourselves. Stay healthy and well.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. See you all tomorrow.